Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining this new session. It's part of the series that KCSBN and Kanata Central are sponsoring and organizing for small businesses and entrepreneurs. Welcome on our YouTube channel of Arsis Consulting, and big welcome to Erin Blaskie, our guest today. And thank you, Erin, for accepting our invite to be our guest in this interview.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you. Today there will be Erin, and Erin will share with us a lot of her expertise when it comes to this reopening. Businesses are reopening after this pandemic and trying times we've been experiencing, all of us, not only here but across the globe, across all the provinces and cities and all the countries. While Erin Blaskie is marketing director for Fellow. Fellow is, she will tell us more about Fellow and what Fellow app is all about. And myself, Tarek Belgit, I'm managing Arzik Consulting and helping also businesses and from public and private sector to adopt and integrate digital platforms and digital tools. So starting with today's topic, which is about reopening of businesses and adopting new habits and day-to-day habits in the marketplace and in the workplace and in the market. We've been seeing the impact, the huge impact of COVID-19 crisis on the global market. As I'm showing here in this graphic, it's showing that the businesses went down to minus 35%, dropping, including Nikkei, Dow Jones, etc., and started recovering very slowly, and still we didn't even reach the expected growth. I mean, back to zero at least. We've seen this change and this drop in politics, in international relations between countries, in tourism and travel, businesses, small businesses. But the good news is that recovery has started, and is the curve, as we just hear everywhere, the curve is being flattened in the pandemic and virus transmission, and the curve is being recovered in the businesses. So we can say that this COVID-19, this pandemic, is a big trigger for a global shift. This shift is happening globally, and it has to happen, especially when it comes to adopting digital and having humans connecting more with digital platforms and online platforms. So, Erin, do you have any comment when it comes to the adoption of humans today? Everybody suddenly started using digital in everything, in our work, in meetings, even kids going to school online, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for a lot of people, this is all brand new, right? Like this sort of shift quickly into remote work and working, well, and we can't even really call it remote work, because it honestly is a lot different than if, right now we're working from home in a crisis. When you're working remote in a normal environment, it looks and feels a lot different. You're usually not balancing things like having your kids at home with you and taking care of, maybe your parents or whomever it might be. So this is really unique times that we're in. And I think for a lot of companies and a lot of people, they sort of had to adapt really quickly. If their business wasn't necessarily digital first or digital friendly, if they didn't have things in place like delivery or even alternative methods to get people products, let's say, or how to deliver services, a lot of companies had to quickly pivot to kind of figure that out. So I think we are seeing a mass adoption of things like digital tools. I mean, if you look at even Zoom as an example, like their market adoption rate was so fast. They grew so quickly right after COVID happened. And we're seeing that trend, I would say, across the board. Even for us at Fellow, we've seen a mass adoption of the tool by companies because they just realize that they need better ways to communicate through digital means, especially when they're not in the same office together. So I think it's been interesting, right? Like, I'm sure you've experienced it too. A lot of people have had to pivot really quick.
Everybody does actually, but I'm trying to see the positive aspect of this the impact of this pandemic is that life will never be the same again, even after
No.
recovery, even after the reopening, and things are changing. And we are talking here about the business, the small businesses that have been impacted and they are still suffering. Although there are a lot of initiatives. Many thanks go to the government efforts that provided subsidies. You know, the wage subsidies, the relief. Emergency benefits, etc. We are
Mm-hmm.
now going to the next step, which is post COVID-19, the reopening, but
Mm-hmm.
reopening with a new flavor. So
Yeah.
the behavior we used to have in our day-to-day business and in the business place and our business practices will change. The way people deal with each other are changing. We are having newcomer, which is the social distancing, the health measures, everything. So how are you seeing also this new cashless society being established quickly? Contactless, now
Yeah.
contactless is the new buzzword.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to business, we are going online, we are going digital, and going cashless. So
Yeah.
I would like to hear from you. What are your comments about this contactless or contactless transactions happening today in the businesses?
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I'll give you a fun example. So this past weekend, decided to take a drive down to a small town nearby called Arnprior. For those of you that might be familiar, and there's a chip truck there, like a French fry truck, and
Mm-hmm.
it's very famous. It's been around for probably 40 years, and it's called Wes's Chips. And up until now, they've only operated on a cash basis. Like that's just how they did it, and even their processes and procedures around the delivery of the French fries was really not COVID friendly. And
Yeah.
so it's been interesting because they posted on their Facebook page like a little while back, maybe a few weeks ago, that they were going to open. They were slightly delayed because they were actually getting their like debit and credit machine for the first time in their
Wow.
40-year history.
Wow.
And so I think when you look at things like that, like contactless options for, especially for digital currency, like obviously not digital currency, but the ability to pay for something without it being cash. And you look at the other processes that they have to put in place, specifically for social distancing and changing a little bit of their operations and how they've operated for 40 years. I think, that's just one example of thousands of examples that are all happening right now at the same time. And what's great though is this is probably the best time ever for something like this to happen. Not that we want it to happen at all. Obviously, it would be great if it just didn't happen. But we live in an age and at a time when, things like strong, Wi-Fi networks and access to technology exists. And there are many options for businesses to go, and change their processes to be more digital friendly. So I think if it had to happen, this is a good time for it to happen. And I also think you mentioned earlier, like you're trying to sort of think about some of the benefits that will come out of COVID for
Yeah.
businesses. And I do think that this modernization of some of these business practices helps catch some of the businesses up that maybe were lagging a little behind some of their competitors, for many reasons, whether it was just like tradition and what they were used to, or if they maybe just, didn't have the funds to make it a priority before now. They sort of had to, right? So in a way, like we've been forced to move into this sort of digitization phase. But I do think it's going to help them compete, as we move out of COVID. And reach more customers ultimately as well. Because I know for me in the chip truck example, if I was driving through Arnprior and didn't have any cash on me, the idea of stopping at an ATM and then going over to the chip truck was just really difficult. It was a lot of steps.
Yeah.
Whereas now I can pay with my credit card or debit card and I'm much more likely to stop now. So I think it's good.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Actually, by the way, you're talking about arm prior. I love arm prior. I mean, it conserved, it kept this 60s, 70s style. I mean, even in the architecture, and I recommend
Yes.
people to visit Empire. It's amazing. And when we talk about this COVID-19 thing, there's no time. It is the best time or the worst time to happen. It had to
No.
happen, and I'm thinking about something that people say: what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And after this COVID-19 pandemic, will become really stronger, and we are learning
Yeah.
new ways to work, new methods, new business tools. Where look, because technology is there
Mm-hmm.
for now for decades, but people were still in their comfort zone. And
Mm-hmm.
being myself a digital transformation consultant, and being engaged in seminars and sales presentations and pitches, trying to sell this for years now, but people, I mean, the resistance was there from
Mm-hmm.
organization, because organization is all about people, right? And when someone or decision makers are used to some old and legacy methods to do business, and then you come up with a new thing that they don't feel this discomfort to adopt it. They are in their comfort zone, and being in the comfort zone is another problem. It needs
100%.
mindset shift before any technology or
Mm-hmm.
any infrastructure shift. So
Yeah.
I think it's the right time now to start talking about new tools in the workplace, like Fellow. And
Yes.
Fellow, you're part of the team, and you're doing a great job with this tool,
Oh, thank
and
you.
helping businesses, be it small or big businesses, because a business is a business. Business is not about being big or small. Business
Mm-hmm.
is about being a successful business or a fail, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about business as businesses, and let's wish that all of them are successful. And
Mm-hmm.
you have the floor to talk about Fellow.
Oh, thank you. So, I mean, what I would love to start with is just, one of the things that I think is coming out of this time we've been in with COVID and dealing with this global pandemic is, I think, two things. Like, one is definitely this need to, digitize and modernize our operations. As more and more teams go remote, and as more companies decide to stay remote, which we're seeing from companies like Twitter as an example. They just announced that their companies or their employees can stay remote if they wish after Corona. So we're seeing that happen. So more and more companies go remote. So with that comes a need to have like really seamless, integrated communication amongst team members, whether they're in the office or not. So I think like that's one thing that's happening. And then the other thing that's happening as well is that managers and leaders, particularly those who are already leading teams or who are just starting to lead teams, are understanding just how important things like compassion and empathy are. In a global pandemic, like you can't hold your team members to necessarily the same standards that you might outside of this time, without keeping in mind all of the extras that are coming along with this. Like we mentioned a couple already, having children at home, for example, or having to be a caretaker, or even just the general stress and anxiety that comes along with a global pandemic. It's a brand new thing for all of us. So I think managers and leaders are definitely learning about that, the compassion and empathy side.
Mhm.
And like I said, they're looking for a tool that helps them have that seamless communication. So I joined Fellow in February, just a few weeks before the pandemic. So I was brand new to the company. And what was really cool was we already had quite a few remote users, remote companies that were on the platform. And all of a sudden we realized in moving into this pandemic that we had the opportunity to serve many more remote leaders. So what Fellow is essentially, I like to call it a meeting productivity app. It helps managers and their teams just have better meetings. It allows you to build a collaborative agenda, ask for feedback through the platform, even create to-do lists, and a whole bunch of other things. I won't go super deep on it. You can definitely explore the website, reach out if you want a demo, all that good stuff. But what's cool is it goes back to those two first things that I mentioned. It helps with communication, and because you're having better meetings with your team, especially like one-on-ones and things like that, you're much more you're much more likely to build in things like compassion and empathy in a time like this. So we've been having a really great time, obviously building the tool, but I think more so really seeing the value that we can bring to companies right now as they're struggling in many different ways. And so that's been really kind of neat to be a part of.
Great. So having Fellow as a modern, let's say, a modern tool to increase the productivity of teams working on several projects or individual projects. So it increases more the way they communicate together and they manage their own projects, right?
So it's definitely more focused, I would say, on the meeting, meaning like if you have a series of meetings throughout the week, like I do, and some of those meetings are happening with your, direct report. Some of them are happening cross collaboratively, different departments in the organization. Some of them are all hands or group / team meetings. So Fellow really is, I would say, focused around the meeting. It just has other really great features that help you do the other things, like manage, let's say, the action items and to-dos that come out of that meeting, so that there's good follow-up and that kind of thing. So it's not necessarily a project management tool. It's definitely more of that meeting productivity tool, but it definitely helps you manage your projects better and obviously stay on task with that post-meeting follow-up.
So being in the digital connected world today and online businesses, it uses also some features to talk to the audiences, like webinars, like virtual events, social accounts connection, and posting on social media, and attracting customers, right?
Yeah, so this list here, if you want to stay on this for a second, these are this list is more of a sort of some of the remote friendly tools that we're seeing, our users engage with outside of Fellow as well. And then of course, Fellow is the meeting management tool, and it does help with communication. And we're also seeing folks leverage Fellow against other tools. For example, like they'll keep Zoom open on their screen like we are right now. And right next to it, they have Fellow open to track all of their meeting notes as they're engaged on that Zoom call. So these are, I would say, complementary tools to Fellow as well. So, things like webinars or virtual events, it's the same thing. People are keeping sort of Fellow open all the time as they're moving through the rest of their remote tools. So it's a great sort of in addition to tool to some of those other remote friendly or remote first tools.
Okay, great. So moving here, so if during this reopening, and you just talked about Fellow will help us to adopt these new habits, right? With this new behavior that will to have to in the workplace, even if the workplace will not be the physical place or the physical location anymore. The workplace is the laptop, the mobile device, and the connection between humans, because it's a humans. It's all about humans, and it's all about people. So can you mention here a couple of the new business habits post COVID-19 to better adopt in the day-to-day business?
Yeah, for sure. So I'd love to start with sort of more of that human side that you were mentioning. So when we think about how humans engage and how they interact, it's especially if you compare it to like what it looks like in an office compared to what it looks like online, there's a lot of differences between those two things. And pre-Fellow and pre the accelerator I was working at, I actually spent 14 years working remote. So got very comfortable with the idea of working remotely and leveraging different tools. But I think what's really important for people to consider, especially as they might stay remote for a little while longer, is that you definitely need to think about how you're going to have open and frequent communication with your team. And it's not enough just to schedule sometimes like a call once a week and then engage that way. Like you really need to think about how can I have asynchronous communication? How can we create opportunities to check in? How can I just check maybe the mental health of my team members? So at Fellow, to create that sort of source of open communication in our marketing department, we have a daily stand-up meeting, which is really helpful. It's short, maybe 15, 20 minutes. We also do a weekly meeting, which is more in depth. So you really have to find the balance, but I would definitely encourage that open and frequent communication. I think the other two we've talked about a little bit. Productivity is definitely something to think about. Like, how can you remain productive even when you're working remote? Some people are really great at that. Other people might need a little bit more support. And again, it goes to that third point, which is empathy. I think we need to lead right now and manage our teams, knowing that it's just going to be a bit more of a challenging time. And then I think from a business perspective, that definitely considering digital and online delivery, like how can you do what you do in a new way? Maybe it's in a way that you haven't considered yet. Definitely now is the time to explore that. That could be everything from, implementing e-commerce or adding, as we talked about, like a cashless option for people to pay. It could even be curbside or delivery. Like, there's a lot of different things that you might want to consider right now that help you deliver things in potentially a new way. And then I wanted to add the last point. I think having increased empathy right now for your customers is also really important. There's going to be a lot of people that pop up that maybe aren't able to afford your service, if depending on what obviously you're selling. But I think just having a little bit more understanding and empathy right now for customers is also something to really think about now. And then even as we move out, out from under the global pandemic and start to put things back online.
There's the key message that we are hearing all the time. We're all in this together. So we need to
Absolutely.
be more empathetic, and we need to try to feel what others feel. I mean, because everybody is impacted and everybody has been suffering from some given point. So I think that was our last slide. But yeah, actually today we are in this digital world, and when it comes to market and when it comes to business, we are in a customer driven market. The market is very competitive. So customer driven, so it means every single business needs to give the best quality and the best service to its clients, to attract clients, because competition now, there's low margins, small benefits and small margins, and a lot of competitors. So we need to get our market share by providing a positive customer experience and making customers happy to come back. That's it.
Yeah.
So I think since we are in the questions and answers, there are a few questions in the chat tool. Yeah, we have a question coming from Maruba. Thank you. What are your favorite team management tools? Is it Zoom, Miro, Slack, and does Fellow replace these or complements them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll talk about my own current tech stack, if that's helpful in terms of what I use to manage our team. So in full disclosure, I was actually using a project management tool separate of Fellow until we recently launched something called Shared Streams, which allows us to actually create shared to-do lists and actually drag and drop action items from meetings that, after we have a meeting and we're like, here's the things I've agreed to do, I can actually drag them now into a shared stream and share that with my team members to create that visibility. So as soon as that option or that feature came online, I actually went and canceled the project management tool that we were using and brought that inside of Fellow, which has been great. So we use Slack for kind of in the moment communication, anything that we wouldn't want to table until our next meeting. And what's nice is Fellow and Slack actually integrate. So it works really well. I can add meeting note, like agenda items right from Slack, and I can also get notified of my upcoming meetings there as well. So we use Slack and we use Fellow, and that's really it for us. I find Fellow lets me do everything I need to do in terms of really driving communication around our meetings and building those agendas. And Slack does sort of all of the rest in terms of like the in between. So that's our tech stack.
Slack, in addition to Fellow.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Yeah, because Fellow doesn't have like a real-time chat functionality. And if you think about the habit of work, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent, but I'll try to not get too passionate and go overboard with this. But the habit of work is really interesting. So in terms of my workflow, and I share this stuff because I feel like everyone loves understanding kind of how to optimize their day and their workflow. So for me, I use Fellow. Like I said, I've got all my meetings scheduled in a week, different daily stand-ups, different one-on-ones. Sometimes it's a department-wide meeting or even a company-wide meeting. And because those are all scheduled and they're in my calendar, if I'm working away and I'm, doing a variety of things and something comes up and it's not urgent and it's not something I need to bug my team about in the moment, I actually add it as an agenda item to my next meeting. And that way, I don't have to bug them. I don't disrupt their, deep work or their flow. But it's still recorded and I still have that ability to remember to actually talk to my team about it. If I'm working on something and I have an urgent need and it's something that can't wait for our next meeting, that's when I use Slack. And so I'll pop into Slack and say, hey, I need you to take a look at this thing. Could you do it, right away? That's sort of the delineation for me. Like if it's something that can wait, I do let it wait, just to give my team that ability to focus. I find it actually creates a much better communication pattern, and my team isn't as bothered by me, which I'm not saying that they hate it or anything, but like when someone's doing deep work, you want to really free them up to be able to do that. So that's sort of how I see them as being different. And then of course we use Slack for things like water cooler chats virtually. If we want to just chat with people on the team and we want to, we've got different channels. We have like a random channel. And those are really those real-time announcement style things. If we've hit a record in the company, we share that on Slack in real time. Like there's things that Slack definitely allows us to do, but all of the kind of record keeping, need to talk to my team about it, upcoming action items, I store all of that in Fellow.
Yeah, so here I can invite all our community members, business owners, entrepreneurs to give it a try with Fellow, and
Yeah,
I'm sure
please.
it will add tremendous value to their businesses and to their activities. And even from my side, from RZ Consulting, if they need anything to support them with any integrations, any digital platform integration, or even advice, we're happy to help. And I think that was, we don't have more questions. All I have now to do is to thank you for being my guest today, and to thank Kanata Carleton Small Business Network, as well as Kanata Central BIA for hosting this series of webinars and for sponsoring them. And yeah, thank you so much. And also for those who are watching this video now on YouTube, I invite you to subscribe on our channel or our RZ Consulting channel. We're having a lot of these sessions, and I'm sure you will get a lot of value and a lot of advice from them. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar, and see you in the next session. Thank you, Erin. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, it was great.
Bye.
Thanks.
Have a good one.